The bakery was closed for the day. The chairs were up, the lights dimmed. The soft scent of sugar and cinnamon still lingered in the air, clinging to the walls like an old song. She stood alone in the middle of the room, her palms flat against the counter, head bowed slightly. Not from weariness, but from reflection. The kind that settles in when the noise fades, and all that's left is truth. Outside, dusk was melting into night. The street lamps flickered on, one by one, as the city exhaled its final breath of the day. In the back, her son slept curled in the same little cot where he once napped between shifts. Only now he was longer, stronger, dreams deeper. He was growing up in light, not in shadows. She moved slowly through the bakery, turning off machines, adjusting napkins, straightening chairs. It was routine, but wholly in its own quiet way. Every surface, every corner held a memory of who she had been. Of every night she almost gave up. Of every morning she chose not to. She stopped at the window, looked out. The city had once looked so big, too big for a woman carrying a baby and nothing else. Now it looked small, reachable, hers. She didn't need anyone to see her anymore. She saw herself, fully. No scars hidden, no strength loud, just presence, just peace. She reached for the closed sign and flipped it slowly. The reversed lettering caught the last light of the evening, closed, but not done. As she locked the door, keys jingling softly, she whispered, not to the past, not to the pain, but to the version of herself who once lay on a floor, hungry, afraid, and holding a newborn with trembling arms. We made it. You can rest now. Then she walked away, and behind her the city stayed the same, but she was different, unshaken, unapologetic, unstoppable. It was Sunday. The bakery was closed. The street outside was slow, quiet, dressed in soft gold from the morning sun. She stood at the kitchen window of her new apartment, a real one this time, not crumbling or borrowed, with a cup of tea in her hands. The floor was warm beneath her feet. The walls were her color now. Her photos hung with care, not tape. On the small table behind her sat a calendar filled with handwritten notes, school meetings, staff schedules, speaking engagements, a future that used to be unthinkable, now penciled in, planned for, hers. Laughter echoed from the hallway. She turned just in time to see her son come running through the apartment in superhero pajamas, cape fluttering behind him. "Mama," he beamed, leaping into her arms. She caught him easily, held him against her chest like she had since the very first hug. Only now the silence was gone. Now there was warmth, laughter, home. He pulled back and looked at her face. "Are you happy today?" She smiled, wide and true. "Yes," she said, "very." He nodded, satisfied, and ran off again, his laughter trailing behind him like music. She looked out the window once more. There was no audience, no confetti, just the quiet truth of everything she had survived and everything she had become. She wasn't just a woman who had been left. She was a woman who had risen, who had refused to stay small, who had turned pain into purpose and loss into legacy. The teacup warmed her palms as she leaned against the window and whispered to the glass, "This is the life I bled for, the one I broke for, the one I built piece by piece, not in spite of the fall, but because of it." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, not roaring, not still, just alive, just like her. The invitation had come in a crisp white envelope tucked under the bakery's front door. She thought it was junk at first, but inside, embossed in gold, was her name, spelled right, clear, and centered, Ava Mackenzie. Keynote speaker, Women's Business and Resilience Conference, Downtown Tours. She stared at it for a long time, not with doubt, not with fear, just awe, because there it was, her name, not connected to shame, not whispered with pity, not as a footnote to someone else's story. Just hers. The day of the event, she stood backstage, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Her dress was navy blue, simple, strong, her hair pulled back, no frills, no pretending, just Ava. She could hear the murmur of the crowd from behind the curtain. Professionals, entrepreneurs, survivors, dreamers. They were waiting, not for a savior, not for a fairy tale, but for truth. A voice called her name. She stepped forward, heels firm, shoulders back, and walked onto the stage. The light was bright, the silence heavy. But she didn't flinch. She stood in front of the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, and began not with her struggle, but with her strength. "I'm not here today to tell you how I survived," she said. "I'm here to tell you how I refused to disappear." And as she spoke, about grit, about motherhood, about choosing to stay soft while being forged in fire, The room leaned in, not just listening, recognizing themselves in her. She wasn't Ava the abandoned, or Ava the pregnant and alone. She was Ava, the woman who rose anyway. When the applause came, it was warm, long, real, but she didn't bow. She didn't need to. Later in the lobby, a woman approached her, young, nervous, eyes full of unshed tears. "I'm where you were," she whispered. "How do I begin?" Ava reached out and held her hand steady and warm. "You already have," she said. That night, she walked home under a sky full of stars, heels in her hand, sun's drawing folded in her purse. She paused at the corner before her apartment, looked up at the quiet sky, and smiled. "They know my name now," she whispered, "but I knew it first, and I never let go of it." And the stars above, silent and eternal, seemed to agree. The room was full of voices, soft music, the clink of forks on porcelain. It was a small dinner, nothing extravagant, but thoughtful. A thank-you gathering hosted by the city's women-led business collective. And at the center of it all, not in the corner, not behind the scenes, sat Ava. Not as a guest, not as someone helped, as someone who had led. She wore ivory that night, clean, simple, regal. The kind of quiet elegance that doesn't shout, but fills a room just by existing. Her son sat beside her in a little vest and tie, legs swinging under the chair. He beamed whenever someone came over to shake her hand. "Your mama's a powerhouse," one woman said, kneeling to meet his eyes. "I know," he grinned. "She's magic." Ava laughed, but inside, something swelled. Not ego, not pride, just arrival. She listened to the conversations around her. Women discussing grants, expansion, recovery after loss. Every single one had their own story. But they all spoke to each other, not above, not below. She remembered the days she would sit alone in stairwells, feeding her baby in silence, while the world moved past her like she didn't exist. Now she was surrounded. Not just seen, valued. Someone raised a glass midway through the night. To the women who rebuilt themselves from the ground up. To Ava, who showed us what quiet power looks like. The table clapped. Her son clapped hardest. She smiled, nodded, lifted her glass, water always, and said only, "Here's to not waiting for permission." Later, as the night cooled and the lights dimmed, she stepped out onto the patio. The city glowed around her. She stood there, alone for a moment, hands resting gently on the railing. She had once begged for scraps. Now she created space for others to feast. And she knew, in her soul, this wasn't luck. It wasn't a miracle. It was 1,000 invisible choices made when no one was watching. She closed her eyes and whispered to the wind, "I don't need to knock on doors anymore. I am the door." And the wind, soft and sure, carried her truth into the night. It rained that morning. Not heavy, not loud, just a soft, steady drizzle, the kind that washes, not ruins. The kind that feels like an ending and a beginning, all at once. Ava stood by the window of the bakery, watching the rain streak down the glass. Her son, now 6, sat at a corner table with a book in his lap, his feet swinging, a buttered croissant half-eaten beside him. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the warmth move through her. There was no chaos, no crisis, no battle to survive, just peace. And the quiet hum of life finally unfolding the way she had once dreamed, fought for. Her phone buzzed gently on the counter. Another message, another invitation, another door opening. She smiled, not for the message, but for the fact that it no longer startled her. Opportunities no longer felt like miracles. They felt like returns, because everything she had planted in the dark was blooming in the light. That afternoon, she closed the bakery early, not because she had to, but because she could. She and her son walked home in the light drizzle, no umbrellas, just laughter. They jumped over puddles, boots splashing, fingers laced. He looked up at her and asked, "Do you like rain now?" She looked around, took in the sky, the soft gray clouds, the cool on her skin. "I used to hate it," she said, "but now it feels clean. It reminds me I survived it." They reached their building. He ran up the steps first, shouting over his shoulder, "Last one inside has to do dishes." She laughed, "Deal." But before following, she paused, turned, looked up at the sky one last time. No thunder, no wind, just light and breath and calm. She whispered, not to the sky, but to the version of herself who once sat in the dark, alone, unloved, unseen. "It's over now. You did it. You made it through." And then she walked inside, leaving the storm behind her, not broken, not hardened, but whole and free and home. Years had passed. The bakery was now 3 branches strong. Each one carried her signature: soft light, handwritten menus, a quiet warmth that made strangers feel like they'd been expected. But it wasn't about pastries anymore. It was about people. About women walking in for their first job interview, shoulders hunched, eyes unsure, and leaving with hope in their hands. Ava trained them herself. Every new hire, every single time. Not because she didn't trust others, but because she remembered what it felt like to walk in asking for anything. One morning she stood by the back door, watching a new girl mop the floors, hands clumsy, posture tense. She walked over slowly and gently took the mop. "Like this," she said, moving it in slow, sure arcs. "Not rushed, just steady, like you belong here because you do." The girl nodded, eyes wide, throat tight. Ava smiled. "You're doing fine, keep going." Later that day, after closing, her son, now almost 10, helped her count the register. "You work a lot," he said. She nodded. "I do." "Why?" She thought for a moment, then knelt down to look him in the eye. "Because once I had nothing, and now I have the chance to make sure no one else feels that kind of nothing again." He was quiet, then asked, "Do you think I'll be strong like you?" She pulled him close, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You already are. You were born in fire, and you came out golden." That night, she stood on her balcony, city lights flickering below like tiny promises. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she let it wash over her. The grief that once crushed her, the love that rebuilt her, and the quiet, steady truth she had earned. She hadn't just survived, she had become a light. And that light would keep shining, in her son's eyes, in every woman she'd helped, in every soul that saw her story and whispered, "If she did it, maybe I can too." And that, more than anything, was her legacy. It was early. The apartment was still, kissed by the soft gray light of dawn. The city hadn't fully woken yet. No horns, no rush, just the gentle breathing of a home that had finally found peace. Ava stood in the bathroom, alone, no noise, no distractions. She had just finished washing her face, steam curling around the mirror like a soft frame. The towel hung from her shoulder. Her hair was pulled back, damp, the kind of quiet moment most people rush past. But she didn't rush. She looked, really looked. For years she had avoided this kind of stillness. The mirror had once been a stranger, showing a woman who looked exhausted, unloved, surviving but not living. She used to scan her reflection quickly, only catching flaws, tired eyes, empty hands, a heart too heavy to carry. But now she stood still. No makeup, no titles, no child in her arms. Just her. And she saw it. Not beauty in the way the world sells it, but beauty in what stayed after the storms. Strength in the lines beside her eyes, kindness in the softness of her jaw, fire in her gaze that didn't need to shout. She reached for the glass, pressed her fingers gently to the surface, not to fix anything, not to change, just to connect. "You're still here," she whispered, not to the reflection, to the girl she used to be, the one who had begged in silence, the one who had bled in private, the one who had carried life inside her even while falling apart. "You didn't disappear, you grew." Behind her, her son stirred in the other room. The day was about to begin. 1,000 tasks would call her name, people, plans, progress. But in this moment, just this one, she was only Ava. No role, no rush, and she was enough. She wiped the mirror slowly, took one last look, then whispered with a smile both tender and fierce, "I love who you became." And this time, the mirror smiled back. It was late. The bakery was quiet. Her son had fallen asleep in the back office, curled up under a light blanket with his favorite comic book on his chest. Ava sat alone at the small desk by the window, pen in hand, paper in front of her. The city lights flickered outside like tiny heartbeats, and for reasons she couldn't explain, or maybe she could, she started to write. Not an email, not a journal, a letter. To him, the man who left her pregnant and scared. The man who once looked her in the eye and said she'd be fine, knowing full well she wouldn't be. She didn't write to blame. She didn't write to beg. She just wrote, "You'll probably never read this. That's okay, I'm not writing for you. I used to wonder how you could leave so easily. I don't anymore. I've learned that people don't abandon you because you're weak. They do it because they are. You left me broken. And for a long time, I stayed that way. Quiet. Ashamed, but not anymore. The woman you knew doesn't exist now. She didn't die, she rebuilt. Our son is growing, kind, strong, brilliant. He doesn't know what you did, not really. And one day he may ask, I'll tell him the truth, but I'll tell it gently. Because my goal isn't for him to hate you, it's for him to never become you." She stopped, took a breath. The letter wasn't for revenge, it was release. She folded it, tucked it in an envelope without sealing it, and placed it in a box of old memories. Hospital bracelets, her first paycheck stub, her son's first drawing. She didn't need him to see it, she just needed to let it go. As she turned out the lights, she glanced once more at the sleeping boy in the back room. She smiled. "You were the letter I chose to write with my whole life." And that was all that mattered. The morning was ordinary. Toast, lunch prep, mismatched socks. The kind of day where everything felt light and slow, where you don't expect anything special. She was in the kitchen, tying his shoelaces with one hand while stirring the oatmeal with the other. Her hair was in a loose bun, apron still dusted with flour from the early shift. Music played softly from the radio, old jazz, the kind she liked when the world was too loud. Then it happened. "Mama?" he said, tugging at her sleeve gently. She turned. "Yes, baby?" He looked up at her, eyes wide, filled with something deeper than usual, something he didn't yet have words for. He hesitated, then smiled. "Thanks for being my mom." She froze, not because she hadn't heard it before, but because this time it came unprompted. No birthday, no school project, no bedtime hug, just truth. From his heart to hers. And it landed. Not on her ears, on the deepest part of her soul. She crouched down slowly, eye level with him. "Why'd you say that?" she asked, her voice soft. He shrugged, thoughtful. "Because I was thinking, if you weren't my mom, I don't know who would have done all the hard stuff." She blinked back tears, the kind that come fast, without permission. She wrapped her arms around him and held him tight. Not just for now, for every time she couldn't cry. Every bottle stretched with water. Every lonely night. Every time she wanted to give up and didn't. She kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me to fight for." Because that's what he had been, every single day. Not her weakness, her reason. Later, when he ran off to brush his teeth and forget the moment like only kids can, she stood alone in the kitchen. And she whispered to no one in particular, maybe to God, maybe to the walls, maybe to the girl she used to be. "He sees me, and that's everything." The toast burned slightly. The oatmeal boiled over. But her heart, it was finally full. She had walked this park before, years ago, pushing a stroller with tired hands, scarf pulled tight, eyes down. She had memorized every crack in the path, not because she loved the view, but because she couldn't bear to look up and meet the world. But today was different. Today, she walked taller, slower. Her son ran ahead, chasing the breeze, his laughter skipping across the grass like sunlight. She held a coffee in one hand, the other tucked into her coat pocket, warm and steady. Her steps weren't hurried. There was no weight dragging behind her, no shadow whispering about who she used to be. Only now, only here. She passed the old bench by the lake, the one she once sat on when she had nowhere else to go. She remembered holding her newborn close, praying no one would notice how lost she looked, how empty she felt. She paused, stood there in front of it, and then, quietly, reverently, she smiled. Not a big smile, not a triumphant one, just a soft, knowing smile. The kind that doesn't need words to say, "Thank you for being there when I had nothing else." She didn't sit down. She didn't need to anymore. She turned away from the bench and walked on, toward the trees, toward her son, toward the life still stretching beautifully ahead. He called out from the swings, "Watch me, Mama." And she did. She watched him soar. And in watching him, she realized she had already done the same. The wind picked up slightly. Brushing her hair across her face, she tucked it behind her ear, took a sip of her coffee and whispered into the breeze, "I'm not running anymore, I'm ready now." And the world, soft and still and open, seemed to whisper back, "Welcome." There was no spotlight, no camera crew, no headline. Just a late evening, a quiet apartment, and the soft hum of laundry turning in the next room. Ava stood in the kitchen, wiping down the counter after dinner. The day had been long. Meetings, school drop-off, a supplier issue at the bakery, but there was no tension in her shoulders, no weight in her chest, just breath, just presence. She looked up and caught her reflection in the dark kitchen window. She barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she had changed so much on the outside, but because for the first time she felt in her skin. Rooted, clear, Her hair was pulled up in a loose twist, a few strands falling. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, not from sorrow, but from living, from laughing, from fighting, from choosing to stay when everything told her to fold. She studied herself for a moment, really looked. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She nodded, a quiet gesture, just for her. Not approval, not pride, recognition. "I know you," she whispered to the glass. "You're the woman I dreamed of becoming when I thought I'd never make it out." Her son appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes, pajama shirt crooked. "You coming to tuck me in?" he mumbled. She smiled. "Always." She flipped off the kitchen light and followed him down the hall, her footsteps steady, the home quiet with safety. And as she pulled the blanket over him, kissed his forehead, and whispered their usual bedtime promise, "You're safe, you're loved, you're home." She realized she wasn't rebuilding anymore. She wasn't chasing after a past or proving something to a future. She had arrived, and maybe no one would write her name in books. Maybe the world wouldn't call her a hero. But she had walked through fire and came out whole. Not perfect, not untouched, but true. And that was everything. It was quiet, but not empty. The bakery had closed early for the weekend. The "See You Monday" sign hung slightly crooked on the front door, swinging gently in the breeze. Inside, the lights were low. A candle flickered on the center table, her table, the one where she used to feed her son between shifts, now set for 2. Her son, now 10, had drawn a little card that sat beside her plate. "To the best mom in the world, we made it." He didn't even know how true those words were. He was asleep now, curled in a blanket at the back, headphones still in his ears, a book slipping from his hand. Safe, loved, whole. She sat for a while, just breathing. No need to plan, no need to run, just be. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and memory, and her heart felt still, not numb, not empty, peaceful. On the wall behind her, framed in soft gold, was a quote she had hung just a month ago. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. It wasn't decoration, it was declaration. She had remembered. The girl who once sat on a hospital floor, feeding a newborn with trembling hands. The woman who begged for work, who cried into silence. The mother who chose, every single day, not to give up. And now, she no longer needed to be loud to feel heard. She no longer needed to be seen to know her own worth. She had nothing to prove, nothing to chase, only space to live. She stood up, walked to the front of the shop, and opened the door. Just a crack, just enough to let the cool night air in. The city breathed quietly outside, no applause, no spotlight, just a woman and her journey and the sacred, silent knowing that she had finished something. Not her life, not her dreams, just the war within. She smiled, closed the door gently, locked it. And with one last look around the room, she built with her pain, her faith, and her bare hands, she whispered, "Let the rest begin." And it did. The room was full, not with noise, but with attention. Chairs lined in soft rows, faces turned toward her. Some strangers, some familiar. All quiet, waiting. Ava stood at the front of the small auditorium. No podium, no paper. Just a wireless mic in one hand and her truth in the other. She never imagined she'd be the one telling a story like this. Not because she thought she wouldn't make it, but because for the longest time, her story felt like something to hide. But not anymore. She took a breath. Not the shaky kind, the grounded kind, the breath you take when you know exactly who you are. "My name is Ava," she began, voice steady, eyes sweeping across the room. "And there was a time, not that long ago, when I believed I had lost everything." She didn't read from a script. She didn't dramatize the pain. She told it gently, honestly. The betrayal, the birth, the hunger, the knock at the door, the first smile that felt real again, the rise. And when she spoke of love, she didn't speak of romance. She spoke of a boy who looked at her one day and said, "Thanks for being my mom." And how, in that moment, she realized she had already won. There were tears in the room, but also stillness. The kind that comes when someone says something that speaks for you, not just to you. At the end, she paused, looked down at her hands. Not trembling, not empty, capable. "Maybe your story looks different," she said. "Maybe your storm hasn't passed yet. But if you're breathing, you're still in it. And if you're still in it, you can still write your next chapter." She let that hang in the air, then smiled softly with her whole soul. "Thank you for listening to mine. Later, when the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, she sat alone for a moment at the edge of the stage, not overwhelmed, not afraid, just full. Her phone buzzed, a text from her son. "Did they like your story?" She smiled and typed back, "They didn't just like it, they saw it, just like you did." Then she leaned back, eyes to the ceiling, and let the quiet hold her. The kind that doesn't mean the end, but to be continued. It was moving day. Not dramatic, not rushed, just boxes, neatly packed, labeled in her handwriting. The last of her things, loaded into a small van. Her son sat on the step with his backpack, hugging his knees, watching her with curious eyes. She stood in the doorway of the apartment one last time, the one she had earned, fought for, made into a home. The place where she learned how to breathe again, how to sleep without fear, how to smile without apology. She looked around the empty room. The echo of memories drifted softly through the quiet. Lullabies at 2 a.m., flour on the counter from practice recipes, laughter from the hallway when they danced to no music. It wasn't just a place, it was the witness, to her healing, to her becoming. And now she was ready to leave it behind. She closed the windows, turned off the lights, and paused with her hand on the doorknob. No tears, no flashbacks, just one long, steady breath. She turned to her son, smiling. "You ready?" she asked. He nodded, hopping to his feet. "Where are we going now?" She looked toward the future, not a dream, not a wish, but a choice she had made, fully and freely. "Somewhere new," she said, "somewhere ours." She pulled the door shut behind her. It clicked softly, and for the first time, there was nothing left undone. No aching what if, no unfinished pain, just a chapter, fully written, fully lived, closed, and that was her ending. Not because it stopped, but because she finished it on her terms. No applause, no spotlight, just one final truth. She had been broken. She had been brave, and now she was free.